There is no doubt that injuries have plagued the last 3 to 4 years of Saints football. Not only the amount of injuries, but who has been injured as well, to star players like Alvin Kamara. Obviously, Michael Thomas is a big one. Derek Carr has been injured. There's been a lot of injuries on these Saints teams over the last few seasons. And while some of it cannot be prevented, some of it actually can. And some recent comments from former Saints head coach Sean Payton, maybe he took some shots and was being petty towards his former team, the Saints, and these comments would suggest that the injuries for the Saints are not just a coincidence. In addition to that, former Saints wide receiver Michael Thomas would also add some input and insight to what Sean Payton had to say. Make sure you're subscribed to my channel. We're on the road to 10K and more in 2025. You're already here. It takes 5 seconds. It's free and it helps the channel out a lot. Make sure to like the video. And 68% of you who watch these videos aren't subscribed. So you could be watching this and not even realize that you're not subscribed to my channel. So just take a few seconds, double check, help the channel out. And with that being said, let's see if we can figure out the cause of these Saints injuries. Sean Payton, the former Saints head coach, had his end of season press conference on Wednesday for the Denver Broncos after their loss on Sunday to the Buffalo Bills in the wild card. Now, I didn't watch the entire press conference. Obviously, I have better things to do than watch a Broncos press conference. If it was the Saints, sure, but Fletcher Mackell, hope I said his name right, but he posted this clip of that press conference of Sean Payton going over how the Broncos have been one of the least injured teams in the NFL over the last 2 years since Sean Payton took over as the Broncos head coach after having an insane amount of injuries in 2022, one of the most in the NFL. Let's see what Sean Payton had to say.
Once again, the injury data, I could give you the graph. I think 32 teams a year ago, we finished first. This year, we're
that's first and the least amount of injuries.
At least second.
No, he's saying this year they had the second least amount of injuries.
From the, I don't want to use the wrong word, but from what was taking place prior.
So he's taking a shot at the 2022 Broncos. They were a really injured team as well. So he's kind of saying, you know, what was taking place before was wrong. What he brought in and what they're doing now is so much better. And they have had the least amount of injuries of any team probably in the last 2 seasons.
All right. And that's a credit to Bo Lowry. It's a credit to the training room, the strength and development. It's a credit to everyone involved. And, you know, that there's a lot that goes into that. And then if you're finishing towards the bottom, there's a lot that goes into that too.
Finishing towards the bottom, the Saints, over the past 4 years, a lot that goes into that. Let's see what else he has to say.
And you've earned that. A lot that goes into that too, and you've earned that.
Earned that. So he's basically saying teams that are staying healthy, they earned staying healthy, and teams that are not earned the right to not be healthy because they're clearly doing something wrong.
And I know Greg, everyone involved in the process is really excited because here's the thing. You're also selling to your players, and now your players are wanting to be here for the recovery. They want to be here for the off season. They want to be here lifting. They want to be here. They're not all disappearing to the satellite private workout expert.
The Saints players over the last few seasons have started to do more and more rehab and recovery outside the building. Just thought I'd throw that out there.
Facilities that are supposedly that they're staying here, and there's more than a year of proof. There's 2 years of proof.
Very interesting stuff from Sean Payton. Now, could he be taking a jab at the Saints in this clip? He said teams that are really injured have earned that, and there's science and stuff that goes into that. And teams that are healthy have earned that, and there's science that goes into that. The Saints have been one of the most beat up teams, I think all of us know, probably over the last few years. And, you know, Sean Payton gave credit to Bo Lowry, a guy who he hired to be on his medical staff. Now, Bo Lowry left the Saints before the 2021 season, as right here, Lowry was highly trusted by Saints players. They'll definitely miss having him around. This was before the 2021 season, And 2021 was a year that the Saints had an insane amount of injuries. That's where they had 4 quarterbacks. It was Sean Payton's last season. And really since this post right here, the Saints injuries have been insane. Now, prior to going to LSU, Lowry spent a decade with the Saints performing a variety of roles during his tenure. He worked as an assistant athletic trainer, physical therapist from 11 to 14, was promoted to rehabilitation from 2015 to 2016, and then he was the director of sports medicine 2017 to 2020. He leaves, the Saints get really injured, and then he goes to Denver, and the Denver Broncos injuries go from really bad and the worst of the NFL to the least injured team in the league the past 2 seasons. And I mean, it's pretty clear he knows what he's doing. The Saints definitely miss him, and they could really use a guy like him right now. Coincidence, luck, call it whatever you want, but I mean, I don't think you can doubt that surely he is doing something right. Former Saints wide receiver Michael Thomas also had interesting comments regarding the situation in Bo Lowry and this clip specifically. We all know Michael Thomas isn't afraid to voice his opinion publicly, whether it will be received poorly, positively. He puts his thoughts out there, lets the people know, and the people receive it how they receive it. And when it comes to Bo Lowry, this is what Michael Thomas had to say. A Saints local reporter responded to the video of Sean Payton saying his staff is amazing, and Michael Thomas down here would respond to this comment saying that Bo Lowry is the difference. He is the difference. Got a response. A great person too. I've known him for a very long time. Hard to find a better person. And then he was like, yep, he is. On day 1, Drew Brees told him to go to Bo. So Michael Thomas, a guy who is very critical of a lot of things, giving a lot of shout outs to a medical staff guy who the Saints let go, and now the Broncos are killing it health wise, and I mean even record wise they were in the playoffs. So for Michael Thomas to give positive feedback about a medical staff person, I think is it says a lot, because Michael Thomas, as we all know, has been very critical of medical staff over the past few years. Earlier this year, someone said it's a medical staff's fault that everyone stays hurt. How does it even work? Michael Thomas said, well, when you get an injury, they build you a little file folder for rehab that's supposed to help you return to play. But in reality, it's all the same rehab exercises and procedures, regardless if it's an ankle, knee, wrist, etc. It's called insanity. Basically, no matter what injury you have, you're rehabbing the same as another person who has a different injury. So if you had a wrist injury, you should be rehabbing that differently than if you had an elbow injury. Just for example, Michael Thomas says that's been their process, and it does sound insane. I'm not a medical guru or anything, and I'm also not in the building, so maybe that's just his experience. But for a guy who has had a lot of injuries, I'm assuming that he wouldn't at least know a little bit of the rehab process and what goes into it. So this was earlier this year, but then you go over a little bit before then, Ryan Ramczyk had a whole injury thing. Dennis Allen said, he was not recovering as well as he wanted to. And Michael Thomas said it's like he uses the same line and just changes the player's name, as if there isn't a team doctor and trainers on staff that have nothing to do with it. Calling out the trainers and the medical staff. They're trying to protect them as much as possible, but hey, don't mind me, I don't work there no more. But that's the real problem. And then he gave an example as well of Dennis Allen saying the exact same thing for Marshawn Lattimore and Michael Thomas. So there's a history here of Michael Thomas calling out issues with the medical staff, not only this year, but going back to early 2023. These are deleted tweets, but a former Eagles player was suing the Eagles over their misdiagnosis on his knee injury, and he applauded it, said that was the right decision. The NFL medical sucks, it's cheap and uneducated, their job requires barely any education or curriculum, and then added, well, at least in some places I know. So for a guy like Michael Thomas, who has called out a lot of bullcrap, whether you agree with it or not, for him to agree that the guy the Saints had was really good at his job in helping injuries, who's now on the Broncos because Dennis Allen fired him, and now the Broncos are doing good because of injuries. For him to give him feedback and verification that this dude is really good at his job, I think says a lot about kind of where the Saints are. Now, when it comes to the current Saints and their medical team, they can definitely do some things better. I think they would say that themselves, but I also don't know how much to actually blame them directly, if that makes sense. The players were not even warming up apparently under Dennis Allen this year. Who knows if that was going on the entire time. Darren Rizzi, when he took over as interim head coach, he said they were going to add an activation period so the players would warm up before practice and help prevent injuries, and that's actually crazy to me. Here's the clip.
But, you shouldn't just go out there and just start lifting weights or just go pick up a basketball and just start playing basketball. That's how you tear your Achilles, or that's how you get hurt, right? So the activation is more of a sports science thing. We take those guys through an activation period so that when practice starts, they're actually already, sweating, and they're already, have already got.
Crazy concept that can warming up before, practice and stuff can help prevent injuries. That's
gone through and warm. It's a activation is a fancy name for a warm up. When I was growing up, we were in warm up. Now it's activation, So, but they go through an activation period and let the sports science guys and the strength staff kind of decide what's the best way to get those guys activated. But, it used to be something that was kind of voluntary, and then we did our stretch period. We made it a mandatory thing here just to try to change it up a little bit.
So Rizzi takes over and they start warming up. You can't blame the medical staff that they weren't warming up. I think that's a coaching thing. There's no way Rizzi takes over and they start warming up. I don't think the medical team recommended that to Rizzi. Surely DA just wasn't having these guys practice, and then once this happened, Rizzi pointed out at his end of season press conference that they haven't had a soft tissue injury in a practice and only had one in a game since he took over. So the injury soft tissue wise and prevention wise was better for the Saints once Rizzi took over. Now I'm going to ask the question, had they been warming up, all season? Does Eric McCoy get hurt in week 3? Does Rashid Shaheed get hurt? Does Kendre Miller, give or take, get hurt? Does Marshawn Lattimore stay healthy? What does the last few seasons look like? Does Michael Thomas stay healthy? If these guys were warming up and that was the case, how different are these seasons if they literally had an activation period throughout the entire process? Now, some stuff you cannot prevent though. Football is a contact sport. You're going to get hit and people are going to get hurt. You can't prevent Derek Carr from throwing a football and getting an oblique injury. You can't prevent Chris Olave from getting hit in the head. Well, you kind of can. I'm not going to go there. Alvin Kamara's injuries you can't prevent. A broken hand because he's trying to stay up. A hip pointer and he took an awkward step with the groin thing. You can argue maybe one of those things you can prevent, but also how you can prevent a bone from getting broken. How are you going to prevent Paulson Adebo from breaking his femur? There are things here that you can and can't prevent. And I think obviously adding the warm-up activation period played a factor in guys getting less hurt. But by that point, a whole bunch of starters were already injured. But I'll say this, just like Sean Payton said, teams struggling with injuries earn that. And I believe, you build your own luck, whether good or bad. You create your own luck, and for the Saints there's been a constant theme here. So I don't know what happens next for the medical team. I don't know if they stay. I don't know if the head coach that the Saints hire brings in his own medical staff or not, but I'm sure that's something that is in mind. Mickey Loomis pointed that out, that injuries were a huge cause for the failure of the season. It just kind of felt like he was only blaming injuries and nothing else. I'm not going to talk about that anymore. But Mickey Loomis said they're doing a deep dive on the medical team and how to prevent these injuries. Meanwhile, Sean Payton hires one of his former employees who a lot of people think highly of. And now the Broncos' injuries are the least in the NFL for 2 straight years, while the Saints continue to have an injury issue. So I don't know if this is a coincidence. Maybe it's not. It's just interesting information. Let me know what you make of Sean Payton's comments, Michael Thomas's insight to Bo Lowry, and just the whole situation in general. Make sure to like this video, subscribe, and I will catch you next time. Have a good one. Peace.